Rightio, welcome Wayne Stemp to the Relationship Show. You're the founder of Junction. Junction is a technology company with a massive global vision. You're all effectively working hard towards a credential and digital identity future that you all believe in. You were founding director of IDE International for 12 years, then on to managing director for Identitech for 10 years, and now founder of Junction, which has been operating for 5. I mean, Wayne, first things first, what really lights your fire about the technology sector?
Well, I think change. I think the fact that you can do things and think about things and then you can actually enable it. And, you look around, you look historically at what change can do to an environment. And, one of my, I suppose, favourite areas of change gets unrecognised in some ways, which is around aviation. And you look back in the 30s when huge leaps were made in aviation because somebody had a dream about building something bigger and bigger and bigger. And, technology is not too different than that you actually enable change to take place away from the way people normally think. So I think change is the major factor, and technology, I think, is the key to change.
Yeah, fantastic. Great insights there. You're effectively in the space of reusable digital identity and credential management. I mean, just in layman's terms, what does that mean exactly?
There's a view around digital identity that I think is one facet. Is most people look at digital identity as being identity and access management. And when you talk technology and you talk about doing digital identity, most organisations think you're talking about access to a computer or access to a network, or I have to be here to be able to do that, and this will enable me to do that. I think digital identity is different to that. I think there's an opportunity around use case development around who I am, what I do, what enables me to do that, and how can I showcase that? How can I deliver that? And I think that, in my experience, and in the last 25 years, and in the different businesses you've mentioned, we were all about cards, plastic cards, and the delivery of those cards into environments. Driver's licenses, firearms licenses, MasterCards, Visas, which were all identity-based and in their own way credentials. So I see credentials as being more the key related to an identity than just access management.
Yeah, fantastic. And let's talk a little bit about, Elon Musk's Neuralink, where he's going to put a chip effectively in our brains, and then the AI industries. I'd love to get your take on that. We're heading into a pretty scary time in the sense of if they're starting to control our thoughts. What's your take on Neuralink and what Elon's trying to do?
Well, I think it's all a trust game, isn't it? Everything we do is all about trust and evaluation. And humans are really good at looking and meeting individuals. AI's already turned that a little bit on its head, haven't they? Where you look at, we can be conned online because we think we're talking to a human being. We can look at someone which may be an avatar that actually looks like a human being, acts like a human being. So trust is going to come back to, maybe we're going to touch the flesh again. Maybe there's the opportunity to get people together, or validation and verification is going to become the norm about, am I really talking to a human, or am I talking to someone who's real, absolutely real? So there's a long way to go with AI, and there's a long way to go with digital identity and credential management. So it's a start, and you have to base it around use case development. What's the use case for proving who I am? And every sector of identity is touched somewhere in your life on a daily basis. People want to know who you are. So disruption's going to happen, and it'll be companies that can solve that will be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you foresee us in the not too distant future, 20, 30 years down the track, do you actually foresee us from a human perspective building likability and trust with a robot?
Oh, big question there, Luke. That's
That's actually, Wayne. That's actually off script too. I've got my list of questions here, but then I'm just freestyling now.
yeah, like that's a huge question. Human nature is to trust people you talk to, isn't it? I mean, you meet someone, you have an affinity, you get to like someone, and then you trust them, and you either do business or other activities with people. Whether we're going to have that with a robot or robotics, I don't know. I don't know if that can happen, because is there feeling in relation to that, or is it a one-way journey? And that's just it's acceptable for some people, maybe, but maybe not others. And I'm 20 or 30 years, I probably won't be here, so I won't have to worry about it. But it's a challenge for my grandchildren, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. 20 or 30 years though, stem cell research, you might be around. I mean, we're living longer and longer, Wayne.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to be in that world, mate.
True. Fair enough. Hey, Wayne, with over 30 years of experience that you've had in developing organizations that identify and deliver to unique customer needs, I mean, effectively your expertise is in business development and building great teams. What are the essential ingredients in your mind when it comes to building a great team?
Oh, I think I go back to that word trust and use that as an environment. When you're building an environment, you're building a team. If you don't trust the team that you've engaged in your organization, then you're not going to go anywhere. And I think trust is a major factor in believing in the people that you've brought on board to do what they want to do. You've given them the keys to the door or the access to the network as it is nowadays, because a lot of doors aren't being opened. I think trust is a major factor. And I think getting people to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and letting them develop their own belief systems in relation to what you're doing, and then letting them be and do what they can do. Simple, really.
Yeah, nice insight. So let's delve a little deeper into that word trust. I mean, how can one go about building trust with someone? Like, what are some steps one can take? I mean, from my mind, my thoughts, right? It's like, well, you could ask them to do something and then they deliver upon that. It's about reliability. That starts to build trust. But from a business perspective, what are your thoughts around, or like you personally, how do you run a process when it comes to trusting someone?
Well, I suppose that's engagement from my perspective, is that if you've brought someone into an organization to do something and you allow them, give them the tools to be able to do that, and then you engage with them further in their life journey as well. So what is it that, turns them on? What is it that makes them happy? What is it they want to do? And engage with them in that regard, so that it's not just what we do here. And I don't call what I do work. I'm enabled and challenged by the daily events that go on, and I have a goal that I want to achieve, and a team goal that we all want to achieve, and we believe in what we're actually doing. And I think if you can get people to believe in that and get people to engage in that, in the journey and the waka, and we're all going together, I think that's part. And that only comes being able to, I suppose communication's done to death sometimes, about you need to communicate this and that. But people in a team, in a close-knit team, if they're happy and they like the environment that they're working in and they're engaged and believe, then I think that's part of the journey. And part of that is perseverance and persistence, because it's not all rosy, is it? In any business, it's not all rose tinted glasses. It's actually hard work and endeavor, and you actually have to persist in what you do and get your team to do that as well, and persevere.
Yeah, nice. And I quite like sort of simple anecdotes, and it is about that waka, and you're all on that boat together, right, heading to the island. You're all going to the same destination. I mean, there was once a time I was in Fiji, right, we're all on the boat, the motor buggered out. And obviously everyone's looking around. But there were different challenges imposed there. I was trying to help them. They didn't allow me to help. they thought it was embarrassing if a white Palangi helped them start the motor. So therefore, if they're not, look, that there is a kind of lack of team. They're not wanting anyone else to come in with a different frame of mind or a different vision. So therefore, if that was in the business world, you really wouldn't want to work with people like that. So it
Well,
is.
yeah. Look, that's a great analogy. I think we see that in so many organisations, and the corporate world, I suppose, is a little bit like that. And some of that rubs off onto people, and people change. People don't leave organisations because they're unhappy. Well, perhaps it is unhappiness that they're not valued or not cared for, or they don't feel part of the team, and so they leave organisations. We don't have a lot of people leave our organisations. There are people who leave to better themselves. They go away to do better things, or they find themselves. They find that they actually can do that. They actually start to believe in themselves, and they start to believe in what they're doing, and they know they can be better at it. So they go and challenge themselves. And I think that's neat as a owner operator and as a co-worker, that when someone decides they want to go move on because they want to do it for themselves, that's neat. That's a light goes on, that something's going on in their brain. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I agree with that. Let's dive into that a little bit deeper. I mean, and it's fantastic to hear that you have great employee retention. I mean, let's go back to the recruitment process. I mean, what secret sauce, and that's something special that you're looking for when actually hiring a new candidate for your company?
Well, that's a challenge, isn't it? Good people are so hard to find, and we're lucky, I suppose. We've engaged with a great recruitment company in Wellington, Talent Army, that just a great bunch of guys, and they vet well and they get the right people in front of us, and then leave it up to us to make the decision. And we know there's no one person who's come on board this company that's been a single choice. It's the team are involved, my CT and tech ops, not really into great titles, but chief technical officer, I suppose, and then the chief architect. But that we all engage in getting people on board and getting a feel, and then getting the team to understand what is it we're looking for. Have you got a mate around, or how can we engage and make it easier, the process? And then once we've found someone, we all make the selection, and then that makes it easier on the working model. I suppose the hardest part is, it's great to employ someone, then it's inducting them, isn't it, and getting them in the organisation. And luckily, we've got a good team that sort of get together and bring them on and enable them.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it's a collective approach. Let's talk a little bit about. I've read there that your company values diverse thought and perspective, and you act with integrity, honesty, and transparency. I mean, we all value someone that can think on their feet and come up with fresh, innovative ideas. I mean, how do you, in the technology sector specifically, how do you define a quote unquote diverse thought? When it comes to working in your environment.
A diverse thought, isn't that challenging? Whatever the status quo is. I mean, the biggest thing I've learned in life and probably in business is that we all accept change. We all want change, but we all put our hand up when it affects us. And it always then looks at that looks good, great. And then we put a hand up to stop it actually happening. So diversity is understanding the customer and understanding what you're doing and how that reflects and relates to them. And then getting them to buy and get on board with what it is. And our ethos is a little bit bottom up rather than top down. And now in our business and what we're trying to achieve, we're trying to get the individual to understand it's your information, it's your data. What you're trying to do is showcase you and your capability. Don't rely on other people to do that. Own it, manage it, and then enable other people to come on board. So that's reflecting diversity, because that's different. Normally we work for someone, they tell us this is what I need from you. They take it, they showcase it, they use it, we leave, they delete it. And suddenly, what have I got? So, and diversity within the team. Another thing, the hardest thing in tech, I believe, is getting female engagement and getting females into businesses in tech. And
Why do you think? Why do you think that is so challenging?
Well, few and far between to find females who want to be in the tech sector, who want to work in the tech sector, and we need a whole push on that to get that into vogue. And I don't know whether that's a male approach, and being a grey-haired old boomer, certainly not my view. I females add so much to business, and we just need more. We need more and more females in tech.
And why? And let's drill into that a little. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, when females are adding a lot of value. I mean, I would go just from my own opinion, but I'd say they have a far higher EQ than men, and that's biologically driven. But that really helps in business.
Yeah, definitely as such. But empathetic, I suppose. I think too that females think differently, and they do. There's a lot about doing, and males can sometimes be stuck on one particular theme and one particular direction or one paradigm, and it's hard to get a shift. Whereas I think females are far more multifaceted and more talented. So
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, doing some research there too around the female-male brain difference, and yeah, they do. They think more holistically.
Yeah, and I think in our environment, where what we're doing is, really effectively, I suppose, saving lives with a product in the marketplace in the health and safety industry, is that we need more thinking like that. And certainly, some of our customers, female-driven, are adding so much value to our product that we wouldn't normally have, I don't think.
Yeah, nice. And speaking of customers, let's talk about the ones that were leveraging Junction technology during the COVID-19 pandemic, which effectively kept a lot of workers and communities safe. Wayne, are you able to run us through just exactly what you deployed exactly and how the technology kept workers and communities safe?
So you remember it was a horrible time when we were all in lockdown, and you saw the Prime Minister come on her daily conversations and talk about data, and the questions were flying around how many people are on that site, and have they all got their meds, and have they had their vaccinations, and so on. And it was hard for the environments of both MBIE, who were running MIQ, which is Managed Isolation and Quarantine, and the Ministry of Health, who were managing the vaccination process and so forth. So MBIE became aware of the product that we had in the marketplace with Stay Alive, which was around individuals and sites and qualifications and verifications. We deployed our solution after an engagement with MIQ, which lasted about 4 weeks to get it up and running. We covered 650 companies, about 20-odd thousand people, 32 sites, and we took the login process from 5 minutes, basically, per individual, to about 3 seconds, to enable somebody to turn up at a site, be validated, verified, and granted access, or to be validated, unverified, get qualified, get the credential straight away, and then have access. So it enabled the quarantine facility to know who was on site, know when they arrived, what they were doing, when they left, and that gave immediate eyes on glass to government through MBIE. And it was a cooperative thing with MBIE, Ministry of Health, and ourselves, and delivered perfectly into those environments. And that's that proving something around interoperability within multiple systems, and then actually delivering it from an identity and credential management. So it was highly effective, and we got rave reviews from the ministries around the deployment and the product itself, and actually we saved lives. We made sure that the people that went on site were the people who needed to be on site, and the Prime Minister was then able to give those reports on a daily basis per day, up to date. So.
Yeah, fantastic, and well done on that. I mean, and the common theme I'm hearing there is speed of delivery.
Yep. Yeah, and I think we shocked a lot of people within government that we did what we said, and Clay would probably understand a lot of that in relation to deliveries at times where you know, lots of things are promised and then there's a lot of under delivery, whereas we're a little bit the opposite of that.
Yeah. Walk the talk.
Yeah, that's right. Do what you say you can do. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a theme Relationship Unlimited can relate to as well, from minutes to seconds.
Yeah,
or hours to,
right.
But it is, it's speed to delivery.
Well, when you go through, you know, a paper process of any type of engagement, you know, you're still relying, we go back to that word possibly we started, which is trust. To trust somebody's turned up with a piece of paper and they're saying it's genuine and you have to validate it. And we do that daily with money, don't we? You know, there's a $5 note or a $10 note or whatever, and, you know, we're going away from, you know, money and into electronic services, and, you know, there's a different trust coming now. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a whole nother episode there, Wayne, about a different type of trust. That I mean, we could explore that later in the but that's a very very good point you've just raised there.
Well,
it's a whole different psychology of trust now that we're moving into this this generation.
Well, we're gonna see government make some changes around. Now, we're one of the only countries in the world, along with Australia, I think Canada, UK, that doesn't have a national ID, and the reasons for that are more political than actually any other reason. And we have a process where we have to prove who we are, and we can only do it by paper or plastic. Doesn't that seem, in this day and age, a little bit ironic? And that has to change. But it has to change, and again, it has to change with a use case deliverable. Why would I want it to be digital? And how can I make that, enable that? How many lawyers' offices, real estate offices, accountancy offices in this country have file cabinets with your data in it, which might be a photocopy of your driver's license, your passport, an electricity bill, any of those things? Where is that? And why have they still got it? So there's, you know, your PII, your private individual information, that shouldn't be in those environments. You should have to have a manner in which you can showcase that is agreed upon from a relying party, but is, I suppose, mandated or approved by, not necessarily mandated, but approved by government, that says I can showcase this once and I don't have to pay to prove who I am. And that's the next step of digital identity and credential management. And the way in which government approaches that's going to be really interesting.
What do you think digital identity? Why do you think we, as well, those nations you've just mentioned, what was it, New Zealand, Australia, and who are the other countries that are the only ones in the world that haven't deployed it?
Yeah, like the USA have a state sort of identity process, and they use their driver's licensing, and they've got their social security card and so forth, which is quasi ID. Europe, every country has a national ID card. So, and that can be used as your passport in the Euro. So you don't actually need to carry your passport around and so forth. UK have their health card and so forth, which is quasi ID again. Aussie sort of their health card, quasi-ID again. New Zealand, we have a driver's license that in the legislation actually says you can't use it as an ID tool. So that it's actually in the legislation.
Really? Oh.
Passport. What else? There are other. I think fishing, a driver's license, firearms license. Sorry, is the other thing that you can use as an ID tool. But they're few
And
and far
the
between.
R8 and the R18, just your rate. You know how you can get those just
Yeah,
age
yeah.
licenses? I think that's it.
Yeah, and that those sort of cards are right. But generally, when you go somewhere like most lawyers had them for 40 years, I still have to prove who I am when I do a transaction. Now that's dumb. That's
Correct.
dumb,
It is.
So, and there are some things going through government at the moment, like what they call the Digital Trust Framework Bill. It's past its third reading now. That will make the DIA easily. There are some opportunities around the DIA and what they're trying to do around the trust framework, which will show digital identity in the future. But we're so far behind. We've got to speed up that motive. And there's actually a digital hui this week in Te Papa around digital identity. New Zealand is running it, and there's a ex-politician from Australia called Victor Dominello, very clever young man, and led New South Wales state government into digital servicing. And we should look at that. We should copy a lot of that, and we should develop that here to make it easier for people to validate who they are. Because you imagine there are just like there's the unbanked, there's the unidentified. People who don't have a driver's license, people that don't have a driver's license or a passport. So how do you prove who you are then? And if you don't have enough money to go and buy the HANS card, Hotel Association card, then what do you do then? You're relying on what? A birth certificate? You're relying on a utility bill, and you've got to photocopy that. That means that information now is somebody else's hands. So, and in this world of trust, when digital identity in the United States, identity theft is the largest crime.
Food for thought. On that level, and I just want to talk about New Zealand predominantly. I don't want to bring Australia into this, but would you say one of the biggest reasons we haven't moved forward into this digital identity movement? I feel as though a lot of New Zealanders don't trust our government here and are very, very private. And so they're seeing on the sides of this, well, if the government have this digital identity of me, that's a so-called invasion of privacy. I could be wrong, but
No.
do you see that as a barrier?
No, Luke, you're spot on. I think when the first part of the Digital Framework Bill came out a couple of years ago, and they asked for submissions, I think the submissions were all negative. And, it was sort of like 90% against and 10% for, because they haven't really devolved the use case environment of what it could mean. And this is not about a government, this is my belief, a government taking your information and storing it to use against you. I don't think they want to do that. I think what they need to do, and what the idea is, that they can enable a credential to be showcased without actually having to hold lots and lots of information about you. You look at, and if people believe that the government don't have information about them already, that's pretty naive, because every government department has some piece of information about you. So DIA has your birth, death, marriages, passport, NZTLL, land transport, have your driver's license, social welfare have all sorts of information about you, Ministry of Health have your national health number, and it goes on. So I think what has to happen is that there has to be better communication around why you're digitising from a government perspective, and the different environments, because a lot of government environments build things to hold data in very insecure manners. And Clay, you'd be probably the first to attest that some of that information and some of those systems is very easy to get hold of. Very, very easy to get hold of if you know what you're doing. So there's got to be more secure ways to do that. And the world of verified credentials will solve that. And it will mean that you're just issuing this piece of information. All you need to know about my driver's license is that I've got one and it's real. You don't need to know my date of birth. You don't need to know the class of my driver unless that's a prerequisite.
Yeah, I'm not asking for you. I'm not asking for your ID one. Yeah, I'm just kidding. But I know what you mean. Some phenomenal insights there around digital identity. And it what scares me really as a nation that we're not embracing it. We don't want to move forward. I mean, you just mentioned the submissions there around how everyone's opposing it, or a lot are opposing it. It's like I want to understand why, and it's yeah.
Well, I suppose that conspiracy theorists are everywhere, and the government taking a pretty strong stand on facial recognition technology and iris scanning and so forth, and some of the biometric stuff. And businesses are finding it hard to introduce that into their environments, but it could solve a lot of things. But again, it's seen as the big brother and big brother activity. And, your data has to be stored somewhere in relation to biometrics. So, yeah, maybe in that regard, I don't have any negatives about that. I think it's beneficial in environments, and it can be beneficial for saving lives in environments as well. However, there is an aspect of it that I can see why people wouldn't want to do it. But I think there are other values in digital identity around government services that can be really valuable for people. And I think if the government gets into a use case development and starts to tell people why and the benefits, I think that can assuage some of that.
Absolutely. Like if someone's reluctant to moving down the path of digital identity and letting their government have all the ins and outs of exactly who they are as a human, I mean, if someone's reluctant to that, have they got something to hide? That's the question. It's like, what? And also the next question is, what as New Zealanders, if we're so opposed of it, what are you guys doing at home? And how's this crime rate and everything? Are they, if someone, that's how I look at it. I go, if someone's not letting the government access that amount of data, then back to the trust theme. I'm not trusting them for them not accepting us to move forward with the digital identity, because if you're concerned about that and the concern about the government knowing everything about you, you potentially might have something to hide. It's the only other reason.
That's I have similar thoughts to that too. There are the people who, technology. There should be no wrong door, and there are some people who can't have a mobile phone, or can't have a smartphone, and there are just like the unbanked, and there are people who will always have to have something plastic or a piece of paper because they, for whatever reason. But that's 4% maybe, or 5%. People who don't want to engage, what is their fear? And is it irrational, or is it conspiracy theory, or whatever? I'm not quite sure. But generally, 80% of people are pretty cool with it. We've got our photo out there where there are cameras everywhere you go now. I mean, it's not as though, the 1984 models floating around anywhere, really. And that's by choice.
Sorry, did you say 1984 or?
Yeah, look at people share social media. Young people, they share everything on social media, and they believe everything.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the irony. And then as soon as the government says, "Oh, hey, look, we just want to move down this path of digital
Yeah.
identity," they arc their back up. You're like, yeah, actually, have you just seen what you've shared on social
Yeah.
media for the past 10 years?
Yeah, that's right.
It's
Yeah.
your deepest and darkest secrets. Anyway, small segue there, Wayne. I'm aware that Junction is working in the forestry sector. Just some fun facts there. I mean, the wider forestry sector employs approximately 40,000 people in New Zealand and generates 6.9 billion in revenue. And the direct economic benefits are realised through environmental, social, and community contributions. Your platform at Junction is the creation of shareable, lifelong learning records for forestry workers. I mean, do you see that as a massive shift, like pre and post platform implementation, in regards to like the attitudes and enthusiasm and team morale with forestry workers?
I think that's a really interesting question. You look at, we'll go back to the word change, and the sector had to change. And what they've been doing hasn't worked. And what they've tried to do hasn't worked. So they have to change. And the way to do that is to empower people, and to empower people to empower an individual, let them showcase what it is they're good at. And what we did a trial down in Nelson with a group of workers going out in the bush and doing their forestry work, and one of the key things that one of the key comments that came out of one of the individuals at the end of the trial was that he'd never been able to showcase what he'd qualified with. Now, this person had recently come out of prison and had gone into forestry as a worker. He'd never had anything that he could showcase his qualifications. In fact, he had no qualifications. And he'd gone and done a couple of these courses, and part of the trial, on his card and his tool, he was able to see that qualification come up as green, valid, and I'm done. He couldn't have been prouder to showcase to his whānau what he'd actually achieved. Now that is empowerment, and that went across that whole group of individuals. And if the forestry industry wants to change the manner in which people work and how they work, and what they need to do is empower those individuals by training them, qualifying them, and letting them maintain their credential base. And then they are empowered by that. And that makes them feel good. And when you feel good, you do a good job.
Absolutely, so much heart and soul in that, and I mean, isn't that fantastic? You can only imagine the smiles on the whānau's face when he came back, and there was just something there that it could show to feel rewarded, right? Or to feel
and that's
credible and heard and validated.
It's not
validation. And
it's not something we set out to do, Luke. We set out to build a tool that enabled an individual to showcase what he or she had as a qualification and what allowed them to do. And the empowerment thing comes from, most of that information generally sits in somewhere else. It sits in the company I work for, it sits in the company that trained me, it sits in NZQA, and it makes it hard to get access to it. Here I was enabled, I could showcase it, I could feel good about it straight away. That's, it's a Maslow thing too, isn't it? Feed me, power me, feed me, clothe me, empower me. And that's an outcome we hadn't expected.
Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna write that. Feed me, power me,
feed me, clothe me, empower me,
and empower me.
That's not mine. I think that's Maslow theory. I think that's.
It's okay, but I like that. Yeah, obviously I don't. Well, it just shows how many more books you've read than I have. But, very good. Hey, Wayne, we hear the adage, fail fast and fail often. What have your failures, both professionally and personally, taught you the most about yourself?
I think that never give up, persist, perseverance. I mean, they're all buzzwords in some way. I think Clay sent me something this morning about imposter syndrome. where I think a lot of times you start to believe, if you don't believe fully in what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, then you can just then fail because you do not believe strong enough in what it is you're doing. And I think that if anything I've learned over my failures and successes is that you have to believe 100% in what you're doing. You have to get other people to carry on that and believe in it the same. And then you have to persist and persevere through everything. And you get your support from the people you work with and your mentors, and find a strong base of mentors. And I hate the word use, but use them to support you and to bounce things off. And if you don't have that, you end up on your own in a circle, and you're bouncing only to yourself, and that doesn't work.
Some good insights there. And instead of the word use, we could just use learn. Quite simply, learn from them.
And read.
And read, I agree. And also, it's a two-way street with mentors. They're getting a lot out of that too, with having you there. They want to, well, Clay's one of my mentors. They like to share their knowledge, to see someone grow, right? And that person. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah. I think you get a lot of value out of that. And any advice to young people is just don't give up.
Yeah, and Wayne, yeah, don't give up. And also, Wayne, I'm looking for a second mentor, so I'll give you a call, mate. Hey, all good, mate. That's all we got time for today. Thank you so much for coming on the Relationship Show. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your time and insights today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Clay. Nice to chat.
Nice to chat.
Take
Thanks.
care.
You too. Thank you very much.
He's whipped off. You still there, Clay?